to have an opportunity to talk to you, but also to welcome any questions or comments that you have, and to pick up any conversations after today, if that seems to be useful. So yeah, as Barbara said, I'm Nick Stenberg. I'm from the University of Huddersfield, and I am part of the Kirklees We Are Undefeatable project team. So our project team consisted of University of Huddersfield, Kirklees Council, Public Health, and the Yorkshire Sport Foundation. And we also brought on other people to work with us, such as Danny, who's here today as well, to contribute to the project. So we'll be telling you more about that. So I'm going to start the presentation, and I'm going to talk to you first of all about, I'll tell you a little bit about Birkby, and then I'm going to take you through the kind of process that we followed. So our project was focused in Birkby, which is a culturally diverse area of Huddersfield. And within Birkby, there are a very high proportion of residents who are from the South Asian community. And our aim for the project was to work with the community members, but also to bring on local stakeholders as well, and use what is called a kind of action research approach to understand the barriers to physical activities for adults living within those communities, people living with long-term conditions, but also to use that to think about kind of practical activities, interventions that we could test out during the We Are Undefeatable pilot. So I'm going to talk to you today about that process that we followed, and then I'm going to bring in Hira to tell you about the actual activities and interventions that we developed and what we learned from that. And Martin is going to talk to you at the end about the kind of key insights for us in Kirklees and where we go from here. So our approach was to really had three stages to it. The first was to do a desk review, so to look at what the literature is actually telling us about the barriers to physical activity, particularly for the communities that we were working with. To then do some engagement, kind of close engagement within the community, to start to have conversations and understand what the kind of barriers were, but also people's preferences and ideas around physical activity. We actually started thinking we would do focus groups, but we really shifted our thinking around that, partly from the findings of the literature review, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But the aim really was then to use these interviews to inform the ongoing kind of participatory action research approach. And really here we meant the action elements of putting ideas into practice and developing some interventions within the community. But the key point around the kind of no predetermined parameters that you can see on this slide, so that really is because our approach was to very much follow the learning. And by that we mean that we weren't prescriptive about exactly what methods we wanted to use to have conversations with the local community. We weren't clear in our mind about how many interviews we needed to do, or which agencies we wanted to bring on board, or indeed kind of what timescales we were working to. We were really wanting to be as open within this process as we could within the parameters overall of the kind of We Are Undefeatable programme. So I'm not going to say a lot about the literature review, but there are some things that I think are very relevant for the approach that we then took forward. And that's really what the evidence was telling us about what makes interventions effective, particularly for the communities that we were working with. And there were three things that we really took to heart as we went forward with the project. So one was around being very sensitive to the circumstances, the preferences, to the importance of identity to particular groups. And what that meant for us is that means we need to have really in-depth conversations within the community, because we can't have that sensitivity if we don't have those conversations and build that understanding. So that was the first thing. The second thing was about really embedding any process of creating opportunities for physical activity within the community. And this is where it really took us down the approach of wanting to use community action research, because within this method, the researcher is very much embedded within the community. So they are somebody who builds a really deep and kind of rich understanding of that community. And that's why Hera, who, and you'll hear Hera talking about, adopted the approach that she did. And the other notion that's really important is this idea of small steps making a difference, and the focus not necessarily being on physical activity advice, but much more being on the things that matter to people. And the byproduct is about being physically active in a sense. So these were kind of three messages that we took forward with us as we went on with the project. And what we did was we ended up talking to 12 residents from Birkby who were from the older generation, who were from the South Asian community and living with diabetes and or depression. And we talked to them about their day-to-day lives, their responsibilities. We talked to them about what were their experiences of health and ill health, what was their contact with GPs like, what was their experience of living with under COVID, because we were at that point living in lockdown as well. And we really invited their thoughts around what they thought would work within their community. I don't, again, want to say too much about the findings, the insights in depth from those interviews, because I think what's more relevant is how we then took that forward in terms of the activities. But what I will say is that one of the kind of overwhelming pieces of learning for us really was the centrality of culture to people's lives, and that everything around people's attitudes, their preferences, their experience of health, their condition, and their ideas around physical activity were shaped by their culture and their sense of cultural identity. And this was relevant in terms of communication, in terms of people's confidence around being physically active, around their motivations, and also their capability, their capacity to get involved. So just to give you a few ideas of what we mean by that, in terms of communication, this idea of having information in languages that were relevant to the local community was really important. And interestingly, people that we spoke to had not heard at all of the We Are Undefeatable campaign. And in a sense, that's not surprising, because what we heard was that people weren't watching any mainstream television channels where that campaign is being advertised, nor were they engaging with other sources of kind of media or internet platforms where they might hear about the campaign. So clearly the need to actually develop information about physical activity that people could read and understand. The second thing was around confidence. So the idea that actually people felt that there was kind of religious modesty that really shaped people's ideas about what they would be prepared to do. And actually the notion of going out and socializing and using facilities that were not directly within that local community. So they might be local facilities, but they might not be within walkable distance. That was very unpopular with people. And you'll see some of the quotes there to kind of illustrate that. Motivation was very relevant, partly in terms of extrinsic and intrinsic motivators. And what we mean by that is that people were not telling them that physical activity was important for them as individuals. It was only important if they were told by somebody else, and in particular their GP, that they needed to be more active. But there were some challenges around that, which we won't go into detail, but it was interesting that had its pertinence, but only for short periods of time. And so there wasn't a kind of long-term driver for motivation. And similarly, there was this sense that actually the outcome of my life is beyond my control, that I can't really do things that will influence that, but that is based on my destiny. So therefore, what is the point of me kind of exercising and being physically active? And lastly, everyone we spoke to was incredibly busy. We spoke to men who were taxi drivers and women who were very busy at home. And for them, they were their priorities. So if there was anything, if there was a need to be physically active, it would need to be meet around those kind of responsibilities. And people couldn't really see how that was possible. They couldn't really even see that that was going to happen. Okay. So we shared these insights that we were gaining from our interviews with 16 local organisations. We invited people to come along, and we designed these. They were online because, again, we were still in lockdown, but there were these interactive facilitated events where we shared what we were learning, but we also invited people to have conversations with us about that, to share their experiences, and to help us to develop some ideas that could be taken forward. And in fact, we had 40 ideas from that process. And what was interesting was that for some of those organisations, just hearing what we were telling them from these in-depth interviews was beginning to influence their ideas around how they worked with the local community. So one quote here, that it made me realise there's a whole piece of work around gaining trust in these communities for an organisation like us. And I think that very much came from the what we were learning because of the trusting relationship that HERA had built with people in order to get these information and these ideas from them about physical activity, to get their kind of much deeper kind of reflections around this. So trust being incredibly important. So we had our 40 ideas and we then took them back out, and HERA took them back out into the community. We used a kind of survey with images on them and continued the conversations that allowed us to bring that down to a short list of 16. And then when we looked at what was possible to achieve within the pilot period, we took 3 ideas forward. So I'm going to hand over to HERA now, who's going to spend some time talking to you about those 3 ideas. We're going to play a short video, and then eventually we'll move on to Martin talking about the next steps. So over to you, HERA.
Thanks, Nick. So the 3 ideas that we took forward were: number 1, having women-only session; number 2, having men-only session; number 3, developing our playbook. I'll explain one by one. But first of all, why we had separate sessions, when if we had mixed session, it would have saved our time and our energy and budget. The thing was, even before we started the interviews, from the research we did, we realized that there are some cultural and some religious factors, like Nick mentioned, that we need to be aware about, that we need to be sensitive about. So women were not comfortable doing exercise around men, and it was same. It went same for the men. And it was confirmed during the interviews, because they said, we doing exercise or swimming or on the treadmill when there are men around, no way. So they would say things like that. So to get the impact that we wanted, we started with having separate sessions. And how we approached this, we contacted an organization that already had a network of ladies, like a women-only group. But they were not very active even before COVID. They would just meet like once a month or something for a coffee or tea or something like that. So we went to them. We said, we have budget. We want to have session every week. And we want a facilitator who is from the community, so she can, so that person can speak the same language. They're not conscious around each other. They can understand each other. And that's what we took forward. And now we have session every Wednesday in a Berkeley local library, and they love to come there. They love to be a part of this, and they just enjoy over there. We not only talk about physical health, we talk about how they can relax, because we teach them relaxing exercises that they can do at home. We encourage them to eat healthy food, bring fruits every time we go there, encourage them to drink water, and they just enjoy it. They are so big on fun. We always have to put some Punjabi music on. So they just love it there. Nick, can you please?
Yeah.
Thank you. So this is one of the videos, one of the ladies that we talked to about the session, and she wanted to share a few things.
हाँ जी, तो आपको ये सेशंस के बारे में किस तरह पता चला?
मेरी कजन सादिया जो है, उसने मुझे बताया। मैं तो पहले ही उससे कह रही थी कि इस तरह का कुछ करो, तो और सबसे पहले मेरा नाम लिखना। मैं बहुत खुश हूँ, हाँ जी, कि ये शुरू की है एक्सरसाइज। मैं तो फिक्र से आती हूँ कि मैंने जाना है, एंजॉय करती हूँ, मेरी बॉडी को हेल्प मिलती है।
आपको इस तरह किस तरह बॉडी को कैसे हेल्प मिलती है? एक्सरसाइज का फायदा होता है?
हाँ जी, एक्सरसाइज का बहुत फायदा होता है। बंदा एक्टिव रहता है और इधर सब से मुलाकात करके भी बहुत अच्छा लगता है। सबसे बात भी हो जाती है इसी बहाने।
अच्छा।
और मैं वॉक करके आती हूँ, मैं वॉक करके
माशाल्लाह
वॉक करके वापस जाती हूँ।
चले, अच्छी बात है। आप घर पे भी एक्सरसाइज या कोई इस तरह?
हाँ जी, मैं करती हूँ। मुझे बैक प्रॉब्लम है, तो मैं उसके लिए घर में भी एक्सरसाइज करती हूँ और वॉक भी करती हूँ।
आपकी बैक प्रॉब्लम के लिए ये एक्सरसाइज ठीक है?
ठीक है, हाँ जी, हाँ जी, फर्स्ट क्लास है, हाँ जी, मैं करती हूँ।
आपको
अच्छा, हाँ जी, मुझे फील होता है कि मेरे मन को हेल्प मिल रही है।
माशाल्लाह।
हाँ जी।
तो आपको लगता है इस तरह के सेशन और होने चाहिए?
हाँ जी, इस तरह के सेशन और होने चाहिए, 1 या 2 और होने चाहिए। और मुझे लग रहा है ये जगह भी थोड़ी छोटी है अब तो, माशाल्लाह आज काफी लोग आए थे।
हाँ जी,
इंशाल्लाह उम्मीद है कि और कोई जगह मिल जाएगी शायद।
थैंक यू, थैंक यू।
So you saw that, and that's how they, not only one, everybody shares the same thing, everybody shares the same feelings, and they're not shy about sharing it. And the way they show their love is, even though we ask them to eat healthy, every second week they bring either cake or sweet or mithai. It's just how they show their love, that how much they enjoy. And we are getting so much demand that we started with 10, but now we have 20, and every week more and more ladies are coming. The venue is getting smaller for us now. So that was a good thing. The second intervention, men only session. Now this was like a roller coaster ride for us, because we started at a venue, but nobody showed up there. And we had that for a few weeks. It was not going well. So we got together, we thought we need to change our approach because this is not working. So if they are not coming to us, we thought, let's go to them. Let's go where they already are. So we knew they go to the mosque. People who go to the mosque, they will regularly go there. So we booked a room downstairs in the mosque. Every Wednesday, one of our qualified facilitator is there. He runs the session for 1.5 or 2 hours. And he does this exercise session, and it's going really well. And his approach to prioritize health or to engage with them or talk about health is not only doing exercise. At the end of the session, he talks with them about mental health in an indirect way, because in this we have to be careful we don't use mental health too much, because it's still a taboo in this community. So what he does, like last week he was talking about not being too angry and taking care of your stress, because it increases your blood pressure. And for doing these kind of teaching these kind of things or engaging these kind of conversation, he used the example that are given in Quran, or the prophet said this or prophet said that, from religious background. So they feel that this is important, and this is like it is relatable, and it is something they have to take seriously. Now the third one, the playbooks. Nicola mentioned that people don't respond to advertisements or these kind of things. So why did we go for playbooks? The thing was, we were trying to tick box every gap that we identified, the needs that we identified, and we realized there is a lot of gap in awareness. Like people were not aware of simple terms like exercise. They would think that exercise needs technicality, it needs going to gym. We don't know that. We wouldn't even use the word physical activity. We would say how you take care of your health. We would avoid these kind of terms because there was so much confusion around it. Also about diet, they would say like, oh, doctor tell us to go on a healthy diet. We don't know what that means. So in this playbook, we included all those things, simple things, just to show that physical activity doesn't need a technical understanding or going to gym or anything. It is in every daily routine, like going up and down the stairs, cleaning the house, or walking to work. So that's simplified. We also put some 5 in 5 exercise, like 5-minute exercise that is only about sitting and standing, moving your arms, just giving basic information. Or about the food, we said rather than having butter or this, have something low fat. Rather than having fizzy drinks, have water. These kind of basic, like baby steps, very, very simple things in very simple words. We put that in different languages, like you can see here. But we still were conscious about why, if they won't read it, if they won't open it. So we strategized the cover. On the cover, Nick, can you show the cover, please?
Sorry.
Yes. On the cover, you see all these people are not from internet. They're actually Berkeley residents. They belong from Berkeley. Somebody runs a shop at Berkeley. Somebody runs a radio station. Somebody is a cab driver over there. Somebody is a travel agent. So they would be like, when they see this book somewhere, they would be like, oh, I know this person. Let me see what he or she is saying about. that was just to develop their interest to pick the book up and read about it or see what is going on. And they would realize that it's not that hard, it's not that difficult, because the tips that we included in that, how to take care of health, is not from some professional. It's actually from these people who are like saying, oh, you know, I just avoid oily food. I just go for a walk when I go to work. I just give myself 5 minutes, relax, like the tips are shown here. So the main point was to keep it very, very relatable. Otherwise, they wouldn't engage with that or wouldn't respond to that. So for this, we went through different challenges. The main one, many challenges. These are only few. So we started with a lot of enthusiasm. When I went out for interview, they were like, we are so happy we are contacted. They would say, it is a very good thing that, that South Asians are contacted or approached. We are not important, but we can be. Many times they would say, can you please go back and say thank you to your team that they're thinking about us? But it was to a certain point, because when I asked them to join the sessions, or come to the men only or women only session, or to join the events that we were having from the for the stakeholders, they wouldn't come. So there was a problem with engagement. Second one, belief system. Why we are saying belief system can be a problem. They thought, like Nick mentioned, that it was not coming from inside. It was not something like health wasn't a priority for them, because they thought, no matter how much diet they do, no matter how much they take care of health, if it's in their destiny, if Allah decides they will get diabetes or any health condition, it will happen to them and nothing can stop that. So what is the point of doing exercise? So it is very difficult to argue with that mindset. Like in every single interview, they would say things like, when Allah decides it's my time, I will go no matter what treatment I have had. Every matter is with Allah. I don't worry about anything. What is meant to be, it will happen. We can't control anything. So it was very difficult to argue otherwise, or to convince them, no, you have to take care of your health because it's good for you. But they would be like, everything is with Allah, no matter what we do. And same goes with identifying with long-term health condition. They wouldn't identify. They wouldn't like to share their weakness. Everything they'll say, we are fine, we are good. They, like one person shared here, you see, our people are very shy to share their problems with anyone. Our people are afraid of sharing their weaknesses, their problems, even with the GPs. Because I remember not one case, but many cases, what they would tell me, whenever it's time for the GP appointment, they would start eating boiling food. They would start walking more, they start taking care of health, because they want the GP to be happy. And also, so that it doesn't come on the medical records that their blood pressure was high or the sugar level was low or something like that. So, but after the appointment, they would go on the same routine. Like I was talking to this person and he said, oh, I'm enjoying today because I was on a diet from 2 months because of my doctor appointment, but it got canceled due to COVID. So I'm just celebrating with a box full of sweets. So, and it was not only with the physical, it was with the mental health as well. Because I talked to one lady and she started crying because she was isolated, she was stressed. And when I said, do you want me to connect you with somebody to get some help? And she was like, no, don't tell anybody I'm stressed, just don't tell anybody. You know, so when you don't identify you have any problem, then how can you work to make it better? So this was also a challenge that we had to be aware about. And the challenges were not only for the residents, it was also for the community organization. Because we realized sometimes they were limited in terms of their understanding of different communities, sometimes limited with the venue. Like with the ladies session, we have a big network, but the venue is small. Or sometimes we have a big venue, but the network is not that strong, like what happened with the men's session. So there were different things that were happening, but we were changing our approach at every step we're getting stuck at. Every project that anybody does, it requires a specific skill set. For this one, because we were going participatory and we did the research before we went into the field, we knew that trust is a big factor here for them to open up. So we had to win their trust. Rather than going with a structured approach, I was suggested that I should show the personal side more. So I should be take care of sensitivity, empathy, flexibility. So I did a small things when I was communicating with them. Like I wasn't using the word Mr., Mrs. or their name. I was calling them auntie or uncle, or calling them quite often, how are you? I just wanted to know how you're feeling. How's your health? Oh, your son's wedding was that day. How did it go? And they were, I still have those relationships with them. They are so nice, amazing, amazing people. So when you are dealing with, or when you are part of a project that is with the similar to the South Asian community, I think having a trusted researcher who can speak the same language can make a big difference. Bringing the key partners on board, that is very important, because whenever we were stuck at something, we were not shy for asking help. Whenever we were like, oh, this person can help, or we can, like we got Danny in when we needed help with the playbooks, we got Barry in, we got Becca in. Like whenever we were like starting something, we were like, let's get something who's good at that. So we were doing that, sourcing assets in the community, venues, surveys, talents. And also we were also aware that we have to be very flexible because of the environment, because of the latest things going on. Change is incremental. So whenever we will have regular meetings, we knew what was our end goal. So our point was, we just have to reach the goal, if no matter how many times we have to change our approach. So I think that was the main thing. Now I'll hand over to Martin.
Thanks, Hira. So that's the story up to now. And I suppose the next thing to just reflect upon are, what are the next steps with this? Much of that work that Hira's mentioned has only recently started, probably since about the start of September. So we're actually going to continue to monitor that and then develop a follow-up report early in the new year, just to look at the impact of those projects. As Hira's described, the women's group has flourished right from the very start and is growing to an extent that capacity is now becoming a challenge. Can we put more sessions on? Do we need to look at another venue? But that'll be something that we will discuss with that community. The men's session has now started to take root as well, and that's really good. And one other aspect that we haven't talked about today, but that has always been part of our potential thinking for this project that we still want to explore, is working with the local radio station and developing some short little messages that go across on that radio station to the community in their own language, that just keep reinforcing and promoting these messages. So effectively, the playbook that Danny has produced in an audio fashion that can be presented through a different medium, because we know that auditory messaging within that community is a very, very important way of passing on messages and gaining trust. There's an established Birkby, Fartown and Hill House group, which is a group that supports physical activity in that wider community across all different demographics and all different community groups. Their involvement, and here I mentioned Becca Gallagher from Yorkshire Sport Foundation, is really important, because they give that sustainability and legacy there. They are able to continue to support initiatives that might arise, pick up those conversations for new activities or ideas for sessions that the community might want to bring forward, and help make sure that those things can happen. And we are also going to be taking this presentation on the virtual road, I suppose. The Everybody Active Partnership, which is a local district activity partnership, they are the overriding partnership body that oversees sport and physical activity in Kirklees. The council, the university, Yorkshire Sport Foundation are all partners around that table, along with many other stakeholders. We'll be taking this presentation to them next week, actually. This is also going to go to the wider public health team meeting, because these are principles and ways of working that we think have resonance and can be replicated in other parts of Kirklees. Every conversation will be different, but the approach and the philosophy, we think, is something that can really be embedded. And that takes us on to really the recommendations. And the first thing I would say here is, for people who are familiar with much of the Sport England local delivery pilots that have been operating, or have been perhaps on the Leadership Essentials programme, this approach and these findings will probably not be a great surprise to you, but what it does is probably reinforce much of that information that's coming out from there, put it in a really micro context, and I think that it really does show that those approaches work. We're certainly not ashamed to say that we learned from those projects, and we hope that others can learn from this, and we'd be more than happy to share our learning with you. But it is so important to take time to listen. We made a very conscious decision right at the outset of expressing interest in this project, that even though we might have an idea what might be the outcome, we would not be prescriptive or prejudgmental about anything. We would just listen, we would take time to build trust, and then we would follow the conversations wherever they took us. So we let the community lead this process. And I'm so proud of the fact that we've stuck to that principle throughout. We have followed that learning. We've put aside our preconceptions. And as a result, yes, we have probably arrived at a place that we might have guessed, broadly speaking, that we would have got to. But we have found out so much more about the importance and the power of culture and tradition from that community, and how important it is for us to work with that, to embrace that, to include that as part of our solutions that are co-produced with that community. That's been the success of this project, is reflecting those things, and that is such important learning. And here is points there about people, you know, who are not accepting or would not recognize themselves as having long-term conditions because it's a taboo topic for them to discuss and talk about. People who hadn't come across the campaign because they are not watching mainstream UK TV channels, they're picking up overseas channels on satellite and cable. That means that the messaging hadn't reached them. These things, you know, the belief system around their religious beliefs and their cultural beliefs, they are the keys to actually making this a success or a failure. And I think that that's something that we've really, really learned to recognize and embrace. And the final recommendation is be patient. This is not quick work. You cannot expect to go into a community, ask a couple of questions, and overnight come up with a list of these are the things we're going to do and move to that. It takes a lot of time. You have to backtrack sometimes. You'll try something and it won't work, and you've got to revisit it and reconnect with people to find out why that maybe hasn't worked, and then try something different. You need to be patient, but the rewards are absolutely there if you do that. So thank you for listening to us. I hope that that's been useful to you all, and we're certainly happy to address any questions that you might have in the time that we've got allotted here, or pick up a conversation afterwards if you want to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Martin, Hira, and Nicola. I think that's been really fantastic presentation, and the work's obviously so powerful, not just the process you've been through and how open-minded you were to what the solutions might be, but also just the insight that you've gained on that particular population that is different to some of the established wisdom, so to speak. A few questions have come in, a few nice comments you might want to read afterwards. People are really interested in this, I think. First up, how applicable do you think your insight is to other areas potentially who might want to focus on the South Asian community, and how versus how much should they kind of do locally to get their own insight, do you think? Do you have a view on that?
Martin, do you want to take that one? Because it's thinking about...
Yeah, I'll take that one. So I think the process is absolutely applicable. That process of talking, engaging, understanding is crucial. I cannot say to you that the activities that we've come up with and the settings that those are taking place in will necessarily be the right one for a different community in a different setting. That's going to be a local context, and that's why the conversation is important. But when we started this process, one of the things that Hira was hearing back was comments about, we're so grateful that you've come to talk to us. We often get overlooked. People don't think about us and our needs. And then there was the fear, are you going to come and talk to us and then suddenly disappear or not follow through on these things? And actually, when they realized, as Hira was brilliantly describing, the fact that she's talking to them just about how's your life today? How are things going on? Not about what we're interested in, but how are you? And showed that interest that's there as a genuine long-term relationship with the community. That's when they truly open up, and that's when they actually are able to articulate to you, these are the things that we would like to see happen, and you can work with them to help them deliver those things in their community. And it absolutely has to be done with them. So I think from that point of view, the process absolutely is translatable, and it's not just around South Asian communities. It could be any different group of people from any different background. But it's the process, not the outcomes or the activities that we've landed upon. They work for this community because they came out of the conversations that we had, listen to what they say, and then follow that information and take that to its natural conclusion is my advice.
I would like to add something here. Like Martin said when he was talking, that we didn't go, when we went for the conversation, we didn't go with like preconception that this should go like that. And the thing that we learned that wasn't in the research, that there is a big difference between the older generation and in the younger generation when you are dealing with the South Asian community. Because the people we were dealing with, we went in to go for the South Asian community, but then we realized that the older generation, the people who are like, who have come to as immigrants and not the ones who are born or brought up here, there's a big difference, big gap, because they are more fluent in their language, their confidence is more, they know the system, but the older generation, they live in their own cultural island. So that was a very important thing. And that's why we went forward, keeping in mind that language can be an issue, that awareness can be an issue. And we need to be like aware about this, whatever we do.
I've got thank you. A couple of questions about your role here, and I don't know if you answer or if Nicola or Martin do. I mean, clearly you have been absolutely instrumental in the whole process in terms of really understanding the needs of the community and their worlds and their preferences, and then driving forward to find the right approach for them. What happens now? How do you kind of phase out that involvement? And maybe a linked question, if with time, which is, how can other areas find a hearer for them if they want to do similar work?
Can I just check, Barbara? I don't know if Barry is with us. Barry, are you there? Barry is one of our team, and he has used this approach in many other communities. So I don't know if Barry's there.
Hi.
Oh, hi. Barry, would you mind picking that up? Because you've got such a lot of experience of using this kind of approach, and how the role of the researcher.
Yeah, so I think key to this process is very much about staying with the principle of engaging the people that you're, if you like, focusing on, that you're targeting, in understanding and responding to the issues at hand. And therefore it's about developing the quality of relationships with those groups as is needed in that particular context. So hence context is always specific. And as Martin has said, it's about the process. So whilst there may be things that in terms of learning which are transferable, it's the process that's important. So getting to the question, I think what's really key is about building relationships, as Hira's already highlighted. It's about the quality of those relationships, gaining trust, gaining a sense of, for the participants in the community to gain a sense of ownership and feel that this is very relevant for them. They want to get involved. But I think in terms of how do you exit that relationship? Well, that's ongoing learning in this particular context, but it's always a challenge. It's always difficult because you are very much implicated in with these people. I think Hira already lives within this community anyway. It was, I guess, in some ways serendipitous that we had this project, and then Hira was there, and you know we kind of just brought it together, and it's been great that Hira's just completely run with this and has made the difference completely with the project. I think part of what we'll have to learn from this is, in this context, is how do we phase this out? One of the issues that we've tried to keep with is not just the residents, but also the local community organisations and their role. So one of the things we'll be looking at is how do we ensure there's capacity in the community to sustain these interventions. So Martin's already talked about the Birkby Hilltown and Birkby Hilltown Fartown group, that we have groups there that we hope will take this on. And in turn, what's really great is the community residents themselves might start to train up as, for example, exercise session facilitators. You know, we don't know, maybe some of the younger members of the generation, and they can take on that community ownership. So you know, that's very much the process we'll be working with. I hope that helps in some way.
And I think it might be worth adding, thanks Barry, it might be worth adding that Tahira is a PhD. She's doing a PhD at the same time. This isn't her PhD, this is a part-time role, but you know, she has got those skills, research skills as well, that kind of qualitative research skill, which I think has been really important actually for this project. So, you know, in terms of how do we get another hero, I think it is thinking about the skills that are so important, and then having a team to guide and support through that process. So we've been very fortunate that we've had Barry on board, because Barry's kind of knowledge is around this process and this way of working with people. So I think it's that combination of someone with a skill set and then having that support system around them that's so important.
Yeah, and I think the realistic way of doing this is probably use of community champions, those local community connectors who are embedded in a community, who have the eyes and ears of the community, who can have those conversations, and then being able to give them the necessary support from the background to fill any gaps that they might have as individuals, whether that be training, guidance, accompanying them over time or whatever. But that would be instinctively how I think this would be able to be replicated in other areas.
Thank you, thanks all. And if I can squeeze in one last question before we close, that's come in. How receptive were the libraries to the activities being at their sites? Is that going to continue? Are you charging for those sessions? How does that work?
That's Hera, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, so it's been really helpful because the library is in the center of that area. It's near a school, so we decided a time when they would like drop the kids so they can just come and relax. They don't have to walk too much. If we would have this in an area that was difficult to reach, or if that was far, it would have been difficult for the ladies, for the women to join in, because what they like in the video, she said that I just walk here. So it was very helpful. We are not charging them anything. We just, the people who are running it, they are getting the funding and everything, but the people who are joining in, they are not getting charged for anything. It's free.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Well, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of the presenters, and also to Barry and Danny, who joined as well as part of the team. I think that's been an incredibly useful session, and so many important principles there for us all to take away. Thanks to everyone for joining the session. It will be available as a recording afterwards alongside all the others as well. If you don't have chance to join live sessions, they'll be there as well. If you have any further questions that you'd like to put to the team, feel free to filter them through me and I'll direct them in the right way. So barbara@insightangels.com, or if there are any problems at all, just let me know. Thank you, we'll close there. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.